It is my honor to introduce you to AJ Conrads, a superhero mom to a superhero little boy who is here to share their family's story about the long road to finding a kidney for Dane. AJ, will you join us?
Hi, my name is AJ Conrads, and I'm joined here today by my husband Ted and a number of friends and family. 3.5 years ago, I couldn't imagine I'd be here today sharing this roller coaster story with you. It was 3.5 years ago that our first son, Dane, was born. He was the first grandchild on both Ted's side and my side, and was met by lots of excitement from everyone. He was born about 5.5 weeks early, but appeared to be totally fine. It was protocol for him to stay in the NICU until he reached 36 weeks, but he was eating well and needed no support, so he was on track to go home within a week. Everyone was so excited for the new addition to our family, and our house was sufficiently geared up with all of the things that first-time parents think that they need for their firstborn. The day before Dane was supposed to come home, he suddenly fell very ill. The doctor in the NICU sat us down and explained to us that Dane's liver had suddenly started shutting down. The doctor didn't know the cause, but recommended we transport to a hospital who specializes in these kinds of issues. We were beside ourselves as we waited anxiously for the ambulance from Stanford Children's Hospital to arrive and bring Dane down to the doctors that we hoped had the answers. When we passed Dane off to the ambulance nurses, he still looked like a normal newborn baby that we could hold in plain air. When we met him down at Stanford 45 minutes later, he was in a glass box. He was intubated and he was covered in IVs and tubes with a flurry of people around him. It was so crowded that you actually had to push your way in. Dane was experiencing multi-organ failure. His liver and kidneys had shut down, and he'd fallen into a catatonic state. He was also at risk of bleeding to death because, as I learned that night, your liver is responsible for helping your blood clot. One of my most vivid memories from Dane's first night at Stanford was helping the team of nurses and doctors keep Dane alive by holding pressure on his IV line so that he wouldn't bleed to death from the part where they put it in. I also remember being pulled aside from the chaos to talk to the attending physician, who told us it was highly unlikely that Dane was going to make it through the night. Dane did make it through the night, but he wasn't in good shape. For the next 10 days, the team continued to work around the clock to keep Dane alive, even though they didn't know what was causing him to be so sick. This meant 4 to 6 blood transfusions per day to keep his blood clotting, and also hemodialysis to keep the ammonia that his liver wasn't clearing from damaging his brain. He was intubated, and he would barely open his eyes. Finally, they found the cause of Dane's sudden illness. It was a common virus called enterovirus. For you or me, this might feel like a common cold, but for a premature baby with no immune system, it was catastrophic. After 3 weeks, the virus had finally passed, but it had left his little body in pretty bad shape. It was like he'd been hit by a hurricane, destroying everything in its path, and now we were left dealing with the aftermath. He had no liver function, and he continued to need the hemodialysis and constant blood transfusions to stay alive. It was difficult. His kidneys had either gone to sleep or stopped working, and it was difficult to tell which. He had 8 broken bones, 2 in each of his arms and his legs where the IVs had been put in because he was just so weak and malnourished. At about 5 weeks old, we finally gave up hope that Dane's liver was going to regenerate, and we listed him for a liver transplant. Dane was incredibly blessed to receive a transplant just 1 week later. He was the smallest baby ever transplanted at just 4 pounds, 10 ounces. Dr. Concepcion and his team of surgeons from Lucille Packard are actually here with us today. His recovery from the liver transplant was not easy at all. But eventually, Dane was finally able to come home from the hospital at 6 months. His kidneys still had not recovered from all the trauma, so he'd been trained on how to do peritoneal dialysis at home each night. Having been through everything he'd been through, I was convinced that his kidneys were going to come back. I thought it was time for Dane to get a break. But at about 1 year old, I finally gave up hope that Dane's kidneys would come back. And Ted and I transitioned to planning for a kidney transplant. We were relieved to know that we would likely be able to donate an organ to Dane, so we were eager to begin the workup as soon as possible. Dane did an MRI to look at his veins, and unfortunately the MRI revealed that his larger veins that would be needed to support an adult-sized kidney were damaged from the hemodialysis he did as a baby. And this meant that his only option was to receive a smaller kidney from a deceased child donor. Another hit. They told us that the wait time for kids averaged about 8 months to a year. So we thought, okay, we can do this. We focused on keeping Dane healthy and ensuring he received his dialysis every night. But a year passed, and still no calls for a kidney for Dane. Ted and I were feeling more anxious by the day. Given all Dane had been through and continued to endure, he was very developmentally delayed. He'd started crawling at around 2 years old, but couldn't go far before getting tired. He didn't talk or eat. Dialysis was draining his energy. It wasn't uncommon for Dane to sleep until 10 or 11 in the morning after going to bed at 8. All the research that we'd done said that kids who were transplanted before the age of 3 could catch up to their peers. And we desperately wanted Dane to catch up to his peers. I remember thinking, no matter what, we must find Dane a kidney before his 3rd birthday. During that year, we transitioned from patiently waiting to frantically trying to figure out what to do to keep our son alive. We had to figure out why Dane hadn't gotten any offers yet. And we realized we had to launch our own social media campaign. We called it Kidney for Dane, with the goal of sharing Dane's story to find his donation. His Facebook page had over 1 million followers who sent us hundreds of leads, introductions, and ideas. Ted and I wanted to leave no stone unturned. We had hundreds of conversations with potential donors, doctors, and caring strangers. Through every conversation, we learned a little more, and eventually we were put in contact with Nick and team at the National Kidney Foundation just in December. They immediately worked to understand our situation and provide us with even more support to help Dane find his kidney. For example, we were so frustrated that Dane could only accept a deceased donation, yet thousands of people were waiting on the list who could have accepted a living donor. It was so comforting to learn about the NKF's work to increase living donation through the Big Ask, Big Give campaign. Miraculously, and it really was a complete miracle, Dane received the perfect match on April 7th, the day before his 3rd birthday. Dane is doing wonderfully. His newfound energy is truly amazing. He was hulking out of his hospital bed only a few days after the surgery, and he was discharged from the hospital after just 10 days. Dane started walking only 6 weeks after the transplant and is now running. He also started talking, and he's eating a little more. The NKF was right there with Dane when he got transplanted, and Sydney the kidney was in his hospital room as soon as he could accept visitors. We're so thankful that everything has turned out as it has for Dane. For now, Dane is just focused on catching up to his peers. But unfortunately, the reality looms that he will probably need another transplant in 10 to 20 years. We're so grateful to know that the National Kidney Foundation will be working hard on advancements over the coming decade, so that should this day arrive for Dane, he'll have access to the kidney that he needs. Together, we can ensure that Dane and the millions of kidney patients like him will have long, happy, and healthy lives. I invite you to join us in support of Dane and in support of kidney patients and in support of the vital work that the National Kidney Foundation is doing. With your support and generosity this afternoon, we will make a difference.